We live in a world where big powers extend their sphere of influence, not so much by boots on the ground, but by advancing their army of shadow warriors. The hot wars are increasingly reserved for smaller players and nations and terrorist outfits because the gamble and the risk taken in such actions are minimal. China, especially, has become adept at intimidating countries in its so called sphere of influence by tactics of bluff and bluster. A significant part of their aggression is directed against India. Those in India who feel we should play softball with the Chinese and placate them to ease ruffled feathers are living in a fool's paradise. The Middle Kingdom, that is China, is by instinct and disposition a hegemonistic power. It wants to push territorial and commercial boundaries like the marauding empires of old. Vis a vis India, therefore, two images come to mind. The first image is that of Prime Minister Modi sitting with Xi Jinping on a swing in Mamallapuram in October 2019 in serene surroundings, hoping for a dawn of a new historic relationship with the Chinese. The other image is that of our brave soldiers ambushed by the Chinese returning home from Galwan Valley draped in the tricolour. I don't need to tell you which image is real and which is an illusion. The real China is the wolf warrior always circling, marking its prey to launch a surprise attack. Is it not time, therefore, that India wisens up and plays the same game of shadow warriors and beat the Chinese at their own nefarious game? Is it not time for India to make a bold move and recognize Taiwan and to open up the Tibet issue in the same manner we boldly established diplomatic relations with Israel in 1992? Hi and welcome all to the CAA show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis, and my name is Juggi Bhasin. We invite you to the Thinking Man's and Thinking Woman's show, a show which generates ideas and healthy debate. To join us, do press the big red subscriber button on the right hand side of your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free. Now, we all know of the Pakistani War of a Thousand Cuts strategy, which they have used against India. And at the other end, China uses territorial salami slicing and periodic verbal saber rattling to intimidate India. Think about it. Both tactics by our adversaries are relatively low cost strategies in terms of deployment of material costs and human resources. We, of course, have responded by moving more than 50,000 troops and armaments and air power to the Ladakh front line. In terms of sheer cost, we are paying a price. Certainly deploy the troops, but is it not time we rethink our strategic game plan and put pressure on China so it does not even venture to intimidate us in the first place? To do that, we have to delegitimize their claim on Tibet and recognize Taiwan. We must learn to play the game of the shadow warrior. We have to operate in a different way to stop the bully in its tracks so it backs off. To do that, we first have to ask ourselves why, in all these years, we have been so soft on their claim on Tibet and Taiwan. There are two or three big reasons for that. After the 1962 debacle, a policy of go easy on China has ruled our strategic thinking. It is not a problem of facing up to them. We did that effectively and with steely determination in the military standoff with China in Somdorong, Chu, and more recently in the Galwan Valley, where we killed almost 40 of their soldiers. The go easy policy is a psychological regressive impulse of our bureaucrats and political leadership, especially those of past regimes, which starts fearing the worst when it comes to China. That must change. The second big reason for our reluctance and reticence is that we fear if we lay claim to Tibet or advocate the rights of Tibetan people to have their own autonomous zone, then China will do the same vis-a-vis Kashmir. Well, if that be the case, then there is news for our policymakers. China, as it is, does not recognize the Indian position on Kashmir, and most certainly not after a recent scrapping of Article 370. Even as recently as yesterday at the Beijing Winter Olympics, China has reiterated that Kashmir has to be resolved on what it calls United Nations Security Council resolutions, which is shorthand for a call to plebiscite, which is the official stated policy of Pakistan. So for all our years of trying to appease the bully have really come to naught. China does not recognize in Kashmir's integration with India. As a matter of fact, the recent Galwan Valley flare-up precisely happened because we had scrapped Article 370 in the valley. Finally, on the question whether our supply chains will be affected if we challenge China, then know this. The government's Atmanirbhar initiative is aimed to not only boost indigenous manufacturing, but also to wean the country away from cheap Chinese goods. The time, therefore, is ripe for a bold new initiative to recognize Taiwan as an independent country. Taiwan is a world leader in the semiconductor industry and chips manufacturing, which is the holy grail for all current and upcoming technologies. A tie-up with Taiwan will be a win-win for both sides, and this move will put enormous pressure on China. Fact is, China practices wolf terrorizing diplomacy, and the only way to deal with the predator, like the wolf, is to snare it in a trap. And that trap could be our course correction on Tibet and Taiwan. Big countries shadow box rather than step in the quagmire of hot wars. Look at another theatre of conflict in the world where a similar game is being played out. Both the United States and Russia are shadowboxing in Ukraine for leverage, influence, and addressing constituencies back home. Putin wants to reinforce his image as the Iron Man of Russia. Biden, after a series of domestic setbacks, desperately needs a win to bolster his image. It can be arguable that what is the need for both countries to battle it out in that part of the world? But that is how the game is played. America won the Cold War by relentlessly applying the pressure to the Soviet Union for decades till it cracked up. And it never really came down to a hot war. The same situation is applicable to China and India. China cannot risk a physical confrontation with India. But short of that, it will do everything to balkanize India. And we also need to grow up, look China in the eye, and advance our chess pieces to take the fight to the enemy camp. Then and only then will the wolf withdraw and stop making its moves. So on that note, I come to the end of the CAA show, this particular episode of the CAA show, and I hope you have enjoyed this episode. And if you like our show, as I said before, do subscribe to us. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.